Nau mai haere mai kuhu mai ki tēnei breakout room ko kahikatia. Kei konei matua Rikki Solomon, guided by his grandparents in Te Hauke, Rutine, Charlie and Mary Solomon, gardening and learning under their watchful eye. Rikki travelled with and learned from Matua Readiata Mahika, Uki, and is currently working on his doctorate of Indigenous Development Advancement at Te Whare Wānau Awanuiarangi and all his mahi and tangihana and just for the people. So no mai Rikki, no mai, hara mai, and it's really, really great to have you here. So I'll hand it over to you and I'll just be here supporting you and maybe passing on some pātai in the chat. Ka pai?
Ka pai. Kei te mihi ki a koe, renei mō te kōrero, te whakatau mai I tēnei wā ki wainganui a koutou. Kei te mihi ki a koutou, nau mai haere mai e tēnō māhake ana hau ki te haere mai ki te kōrero ki a koutou. Ko ai au he mokopuna hau ngā te kahu nunu me ngā te kahu ki Whāngaroa, rangi tāne, ngā puhi, Ireland, Norway, Wales, hoki, e tēnō nui te kupunga oku matua tipuna, e tipu e noho ana au ki wainganui e tamaki makaurau I nai nei, o tamaki maka around, ki a koutou mai e noho ki waho o tamaki, engari ke te mihi ki a koutou. Ka tīmata tēnei kōrero ki a koutou he karake o ngā te kahu nunu ki te whakatō ngā kumara I tēnei waihai. Takataka mai ko koe hei whakaroa noa tia mārukuruku ai te kākono kai. Tauri e te pū, tauri e te wiu, tauri e te aka, tauri e te koko I a whenua. Ka putu e whetu, ka putu e waru, tuku e te taupiri e te tai te aorangi. Ua te ua whatu I rungi o haururu papa. Papa no te whatutiri ki runga rā ko wai e whia. Ko wai e uru mānanga ka tohi atu tamaki te ake rautangi. E rua atu. Rua tahi te uhi nei, te taro nei, te kumara pūhara nui nei. Whakatahe mai ki te waipani ka tuku e te papa e karatau. E haere e te po e te aha. E haere e te whetu e te waru rau e haere mai te tuki. Haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. I thought I'll start with that a karake that was used for planting and a celebration, which is a celebration of planting our kumara. We would know that there was, for us, when we come into spring is often the time of planting, but we would be going into different phases, and one of these phases is called Aroaro Mahana. And Aroaro Mahana is a transition from hōtoke, not quite koanga, but there's this phase sitting in between there. And what we would call Aroaro Mahana, and as you would have noticed, the weather's picked right up in terms of e tēnō mahana I nainei, or especially for us in Tamaki, it's really warmed up from last week on that whero moon, which means we come into the full swing of koanga. And our karake around koanga was a celebration time, so some iwi would celebrate hōtoke in terms of matariki. We would also celebrate whakāhu kere and whakāhu rangi, or in our calendars it's called te tātou uru tahi and te tātou uru ora. And in those months that we would do these karake about planting and about Maramataka. And actually one of the biggest challenges we have, I suppose, right now is how do I take all this mātauranga of thousands of years and use it in a practical application within about 45 minutes. And I hope I'm able to share some stuff that might be some enlightenment, might be some kōru that can open up, I suppose, open up the conversations, open up the wānanga of the Maramataka. Now I should be able to, I can share my screen. Hopefully you can see that. So we call it Ngā Kitenga o te Maramataka, and our whānau is known as Maramataka Māori. And so when I was going around listening to different kōrero, they were talking about Maramataka Māori, I had no idea what they were talking about. It was not to actually sit down and listen, and in our whānau is known as Maramataka Māori. And Maramataka meaning mātauranga, mean enlightenment. And I hope that this kōrero that we go through will give some enlightenment to what we're going through and how we can use the Maramataka in a modern day context. Because when we have a look at it, it was a tool that our tipuna used, and their whole life governed on that, because the sustainability, the kai gathering of the hiika raputuna was all done at specific times with the environment. But one that guides me the most on this kōrero is this whakatauki, which goes tuia ki te rangi, tuia ki te whenua, tuia ki te mono, rongo te pō, rongo te ao. And essentially what they're saying, what is in the heavens is bound to the land and the sea, balancing between the divisions of night and day. And that's what Maramataka is. When we look at it, Maramataka is a lunar calendar, but it's just more than a lunar calendar. It's an environmental calendar. It's moving in sync with the taiao. It's studying the stars, it's studying the moon, it's studying the sun, tamanuitera, it's studying the plants, the trees, the fish, ika and everything. But our big one in this one is we've been using this in hauora. And e rongo te pō, rongo te ao is one of my favourite parts of this, is making sure that we stay balanced. E rongo te pō representing hina marama, e rongo te ao representing tamanuitera. Where do we find this balance between these two worlds? And te ao, in terms of tamanuitera, we're often using our calendars today of the Gregorian calendar. And one of the things that shifted when that calendar was introduced into Aotearoa, we grasped it. We're one of the first countries to really hold on to it, and we adopted that time. But in the process of doing that, and with urbanisation and moving into the cities and into mahi, is that mātauranga became lost. It didn't quite fit to where we were. And what we're doing now is, and I'm grateful for the many tohunga, or the many teachers of the Maramataka right now, especially Papa Rereata Makiha. You know, you got Ruben and Henny up into Taitokura. We've got Piripi Lambert down in Waikato. We've got, especially the main big one that's made a big difference in sharing, is Rangi Mātāmua. Look and learn from all of us. We all have different views. We all share different things, and we're all offering different observations. And that's what the Maramataka is about. I promise you're an expert in the Maramataka, but to really show how this works is tuia ki te rangi. And I'm going to speak into, because we got haki here coming up. We're in Whiringa rangi right now. So I'm going to be speaking a few weeks ahead of time and just sharing just some insights of how that whakatauki works. So tuia ki te rangi is a star named Rehua. And in Rehua, actually, if you go out in the evenings tonight and you look to the out to Hauauru, you'll see the top of this hook, and this hook is called te mātaua Māui, except it's not lying down like it's just standing up like a question mark, sitting out in the west. But you'll see if you look to west and you see this bright star, that bright star is called Mere Mere Tuahiahi, which is Venus. And then you'll see these other stars, which is Pariarau and Kōpū Nui, which is Venus, Saturn, and Jupiter. And down to the left, below them, is this Rehua. What's happening, there's a red star, you'll just see, and that red star is Rehua. And in a few weeks' time, Rehua is going to disappear from the night sky, and then pop up in the east in the mornings and becomes a marker for the months of December. And so that's a tuia ki te rangi, is Rehua rising in the morning. Tuia ki te whenua is the Pahutakawa is blooming. And so just a real simple formula, if the Rehua is rising, we're beginning to start to see the Pahutakawa blooming. And the other tohu that I want to touch on in terms of tuia ki te whenua is this. It's called te puarenga. And to puarenga is, or the puarenga is like a fungus or a plant that grows at the time of the rising of rehua. And so, to give a bit of a whakapapa in terms of pūrākau, the pahutakawa for some iwi and pūrākau is that rehua and Matariki formed a relation, two stars, and they had a daughter named Pahutakawa. This puarenga was a relationship between rehua and a star called Puanga, and the puarenga is known as Hefetu or the Ngahere, and this flourishes at the time of the rising of rehua and grows between rehua rising and Puanga rising in these times. So our tupuna used plants, they used trees and flowers as markers of these calendars. In terms of tui ki te mona, he kina, he mau kai ngā kina. So the pahutakawa gets nice and red, rehua rises, our kina are waiting for us to gather the harvest of kai and at their most fattest, he mau ana ngā kina. So that's how that formula works in terms of tuia ki te rangi, tuia ki te whenua, tuia ki te mona. And the other day you would have had, and I believe you had Papa Mark and Whaia Dai on here, and they're absolutely amazing, and they spoke about uru, and that from uru's pain and from uru's tears, a kapota mai te Maramataka, that these tears that fell of uru were placed up and became the stars, the moon and the sun. And that's where that Maramatanga Māori is that when we go, and we always teach when we're going through our most darkest times, look to the heavens and to the pain of uru to help you navigate through that. And there's many Maramataka in Aotearoa. There's just not one Maramataka to rule them all. There should be a different Maramataka in every rohe, in every area, and that's what, and all of them are valid, and all of them is correct. And my only one invite to you, if you're going to start studying Maramataka, try not to compare them all, because I can tell you, e huri ana tō hinengara, your mind will just start spinning around and you get confused, and then you're going, oh heck, I've just got myself into confusing. This Maramataka says to do this, and that Maramataka says to do that. What you really want to do is when you're beginning your journey is, where am I? And what's the Maramataka of that rohe? Or do I have a Maramataka in my whakapapa? And start observing from that. Because all of them have slight different times that they start. Some will start at whero, some will start at Otiria, some will start at Rākau Nui. It's knowing the whakapapa of your Maramataka is really important. Ka pai? So in terms of he Maramatanga Māori and how we use it, we're all familiar with the whare tapawha. Oh, that's an assumption on my behalf, but it's generally a framework of health that most of us will know, which is a henengaro, a tinana, a wairua, a henengaro, and so that's our whare tapawha. And when I work with our whānau, often, and we're working with our doctors and practitioners who may be non-Māori, I go, they can rattle this off. Because we're very well educated and they learnt it and they're passionate about it. But the next phase is how do we do that? How do you live and apply the whare tapawha? Because one of my big saying is knowing makes no difference. Knowing makes absolutely no difference. It's what we do with the knowing makes the difference. So for all of us at the moment, I know for myself, I know how, if I want to save money, the golden rule of saving money is don't spend it and save it. But knowing that is not enough. Or if I want to lose weight, I know that if it's exercise and eat healthy, but knowing that makes no difference. It's the application of the mātauranga leads to māramatanga. Without māramatanga, then it really impacts the mauri that we breathe into it. And so when we're following the whare tapawha, it's nice that we know that, but it's how we're applying it. And a whakatauki I use in this time is goes, te tikanga ke ako, te pono kia marama, ngā pūrākau kia maumahara. And I took this from a First Nation whakatauki, which says, teach me the facts and I'll learn, tell me the truth and I'll understand, but tell me a story and I'll remember that forever in my heart. So the secret is we get taught, every year our data gets released to us, especially for Māori, and it's generally not a very, it's not very empowering, if I can put it that way. But they teach us the facts, and we'll learn, tell us the truth and we'll understand. But when we learn our pūrākau and the whakapapa of our atua, and we learn the story and listen to the stories of that, that's where the transformation happens, is in the story. So, in terms of Maramataka, I'm just going to talk briefly on 4 parts of our Maramataka. And last week, around Thursday or Friday, we would have had a whero moon. And the whero moon is the new beginning of a month. And often we think of that name whero, and we often think, it's our tipuna here would often say, he whero whero te marama, he rā tino kino, he rā rā kino. It's often, hey, it's a bad time. However, when we look at that, our tipuna said, don't plant, don't fish at that time, because the environment is going through a bad time. And if you look at most indigenous cultures around the world, they generally had a rest day on whero. And whero was often seen as a day off. Now, on a whero night, you won't see the moon in the night sky. So people say, I can't see the moon. On these whero nights is when, before and after whero, is very unlikely you'll see the moon, and you begin to see little slithers of her. But on the whero night, it's actually the best night to see the stars. So it's known as a whero night. And I often say it's a perfect balance. But mai rā no, our tipuna, in that time, they would bring the whānau in, because often that time was seen as a time of mischief, or an invading iwi would come in. They would move under the cover of darkness. So our tipuna would say to be very aware and to be alert at this time. And we're going through this tamatea at the moment. Most Maramataka say we'll be going through tamatea right now. And tamatea meaning to be unsettled, devouring, unpredictable. And often this is a lot to do with the winds, the weather. The weather becomes unpredictable. We get 4 seasons in one day. 1 second you're out there and thinking it's sunny, and next minute there's this thunderstorm happening, and then this rain, then it comes back out again. Our tipuna said, don't go out on the ocean at this time, because Tāwhiri and Tangaroa are going to have a bit of a disagreement in that this time, especially Tāwhiri Mate, and the weather and the ocean becomes unpredictable. So our tipuna say, be very careful on the water. However, at this time is a good time to get into the ngahere. And so we go into whānau or tāne, is that this is a great time to go and connect into tāne, to connect to Tāwhiri Mātia, to feel that wind, and to puria nei. In the song of Hirini Mau, puria nei te hau, use the winds at this time to cleanse, to let go. A really good time to get those tonga puoro out, and to have a blast, and to get in terms of our breathing. It's a really good time to get the pūrere hua and the poratiti, and to get those vibrations moving. It's actually a beautiful time in terms of our Maramataka. Rākau Nui is the full moon. And in terms of Rākau Nui, and when I was growing up, my kui said, Rākau Nui, the name of Rākau Nui, comes from the rākau of Rona sitting up in Hina Marama, and when she's at her most fullest, you begin to see the full picture of that rākau. And Rākau Nui being the full moon, and a lot of our whānau and those that work in front line in terms of police and midwives and nurses often say that this becomes a time where people have high energy, we get their hospitals are full, births are at highest, a lot of more people in distress. However, in saying that, when we look at this time, many of us get impacted in different ways. So Maramataka is not saying that everyone's going to be high energy at that time. However, in that time, I know when I'm in that period, I necessarily need to sleep. So using Maramataka is about listening to your tinana, listening to the taiao, and moving with that. So if your tinana is, we get those times that our tinana is crying and wanting to connect to wai, to the water or to the ocean, but we don't. However, our tinana might say, I need to go into the ngahere. Our hinengaro might say, I need to connect to the moana. Our hinengaro needs, I need to sit on papa tūnaku. That's what Maramataka is, to really connect to listen to your tinana, because the ngā atua, or the environments, are guiding us, and your body and your hinengaro will speak what you need to connect to. In terms of Tangaroa, Tangaroa is our great ocean is about connecting to the moana. Our tipuna often said this is the most productive time of connecting to, in terms of planting, because Tangaroa was a very productive time. And so in terms of we're planting our kumara, that's the best time to plant them. If we're planting anything underground, it's in terms of Tangaroa. It's also a good time to go and do a puri e te, o te moana, o ngā waitai, is to get out into the ocean on those outgoing tides and letting things go. We can kara, we can let go of that hara that we might be carrying, or we might have that mamai and sitting there and just having a karakia. And often we get asked, what sort of karakia do we do? And I always say, well, whatever karakia you're having on ngākau, let that speak. Sometimes we use the tāwhito karakia, but I always say the most powerful karakia, whether in English or Māori or in a language, it may not even be words, it may be with tears, it may be with a waiata, it may be with a karanga. One that comes from the ngākau is one of the most powerful karakia that you can do. So outgoing tide of Tangaroa is known as a tai timu, and a tai timu is a time to let go, and timu means to reveal the things that are hidden. And so during that low tide, Tangaroa breathes the tide goes out, and it reveals all that was hidden there. And so this is a time of letting go. A tai pare is a high tide, which is the regenerating of the wai. And so there's many forms of puri that we can form around Tangaroa. Even just going diving, fishing is a form of healing. And this is a time that we can gather that kai of Tangaroa in terms of whiro, one of the practices that we do around whiro is fasting. I just saw pātai just pop up there in the corner. And that fast, noho puku is one of the most powerful things we can do in terms of times of whiro and taking care of our puku. I love the whakapapa from Tangaroa down to whiro, because it goes from Tangaroa, the last of the Tangaroas could be Tangaroa Kio, then it goes o tāne, o rongonui, o mauri, mutu whenua, whiro. O tāne, in terms of, let's have the kai of tāne. O rongonui, let's have the kai of rongo and rongoa, and heal our tinana, heal our puku. O mauri is, what are we going to do to take care of our mauri and take care of our life, our wairua, our hinengaro. And one of the powerful things we do at that time is to do whakapapa, our identity, spend the day on our identity, connecting to our maunga if we can, or connecting to our tipuna, learning who they are, go to our marae, take care of their wairua. Then the next one, mutu whenua, after all mauri, mutu whenua, mutu means stop and connect to the land. Mutu whenua is that I call the day of, and we use this in mahi atua hene kaurohia, is a day of reflection. That day we use to stop, open a noho puku if we choose to, and we reflect on that month, and we have a pure and we let that month go. So what that does is we're not carrying over the previous month into the new month, and we get to start again. We get to celebrate it. You know, we celebrate once a year, going around Tamanui today, and we celebrate that. We get all our whānau around. We have the big New Year's celebration. But Hina Marama completes a revolution, a complete circle, 13 times a year. And we should be celebrating. And if we break, instead of just celebrating once a year, we're celebrating 13 times a year on a whenua, on mutu whenua, and letting go, and performing a pure and a tohi, a pure to let things go, and a tohi to open and welcome the new month, we become far more productive. So we noho puku, and then on whiro, and we, from our pūrākau, whiro attacked rongo, and especially tū mātaunga in a battle on Tohu rangi, and tū mātaunga got hit with the puku disease. And so when we have a look at whiro is often associated with puku disease. So if we have a look at that whakapapa from Tangaroa, we're eating the kai of Tangaroa, tō tāne, rongo, and then we go into a noho puku. We've spent a whole 5 to 8 days healing our puku, emptying the puku, and it's one of the most powerful things that we can do for our tinana is to noho puku. And then on the whiro, I always say, after we finish our noho puku, when we eat kai to heal our puku, because they often talk about mai rā that our tipuna, when they did study of our tipuna, that they were the healthiest people they had seen because of the fermented kai that they ate. Fermented kai should be one of our most important nutrition that we're eating, and we, you know, whether that be kangapero, rotten corn, just drop the sugars. Doesn't taste as nice, but even down to like, what's that kai that we eat now? Sauerkraut, kombucha, everything that is fermented, they'll heal our puku. Stay away from the waipiro during this time, in terms of times of whiro, but let's heal that puku with fermented kai. Now, in just what most Maramataka would look like, this is a kahununu one, ki wairo. So our whānau come from Ngā te kahununu ki wairo, ki whakaki. And so most of them come this good day for fishing, good day for planting, and most of it because that was what was important to our tipuna at that time. Because if the tohunga got this wrong, the consequences is that the iwi or that whānau would go hungry. And if you didn't have kai, you would be in trouble, because the two most important days, months, or seasons to our tipuna was koanga and ngāhuru. Because that was when we planted, and that's when we harvested. Those were really important. Raumati, or someone was known as the waru. And the waru meaning, or the 8th month, but it also meant that was the time of least growth. So that pātaka that our tipuna grew in koanga, and we harvested in ngāhuru, that harvest had to get them through hōtoke, koanga, and raumati. And one of the things that we're missing right now is how do we apply that knowledge right now? And if we have a look at where we're right now in terms of Maramataka is about looking to the future and working backwards. And a prime example is, if I can use this, and it was with having a quick kōrero with Renee right at the beginning. I worked for an organisation called Feed the Need. And it was about providing kai during the winter months, only the winter months. And we know that during winter, our whānau are cold. We know that they are generally hungry. and that there's less kai because it's a time of scarcity. But we know that, but we generally wait until we get to hōtoke before we do something, because we live in this environment, we only deal with what's in front of us. Maramataka is about looking beyond now. Look out to the future, work back, and I can tell you, just from my observations here in Tamaki, and I'm not too sure how this is for the rest of Aotearoa, is that the cost of living and the cost of kai has I say exploded, has gone way beyond what a lot of our whānau may be able to afford. And so for the last 3 years, one of the biggest kōrero I've been that we've been promoting for this time is that every whānau grow a garden. And that's if we want to be true followers of the Maramataka and to be a true practitioner of it, we can use it in terms of our hauora, but the one of the biggest tohu that we can get of the Maramataka is actually growing a garden. Now, I'm not telling to go and plant 20 acres of kai or 20 acres of kumara, 20 acres of riwai, 20 acres of pokena. That's because that's what we grew up when I was young. I'm adverse to gardening right now in terms of that type of gardening. Weeding was not my favourite thing to do. We would weed all day. And I said, I'm never doing that again. But one thing is grow a small garden. You can grow it in an ice cream container. You might just have a little patch of dirt, put some corn in there or some pokena. You might just spend $20 or $10 on the seeds, but that will save you $100 in the future. Growing a garden, if that one thing that we can do is out of this kōrero, and you just get some tomatoes or get your tamariki to plant something, or you plant something, just that's my invitation, is to plant something now, because that's really one of the most important things that we can do. Because with the cost of kai now, I think it was $12. We went in there the other, just quickly go and grab some vegetables, and it was $12. I think something like $8 for broccoli, and I'm like for 2 broccoli, and I'm going, whoa. And the cost of petrol, but just little things that we can do around our home in terms of planting our kai can save us and add more. I suppose save us a few little pennies for those times. The other beautiful thing is that you can share it out and have other people participate in that. So this is a whole, most of our Maramataka come and they have a whole story in that. But that's where we go, we know that, but how do we apply that? And that's where the Māramatakas often we look at Matariki, and Matariki is going to become a celebration that we have. But Matariki is not just about a celebration of the new year. Matariki is about pointing out into the future what that year is going to be. And if we listen to if I remember correctly, listening to Rangi Mātā Mua's kōrero Matariki this year, that it was a time of scarcity, because that Matariki cluster was close together, wasn't quite clear. So if we have a look at that, is that these great tohunga are giving us some tohu. The question is, what do we do with that mātauranga? What can we do there? If it's going to be, if our mairanoa, our tipuna saw that it was going to be a lot of rain during that year, well, they wouldn't plant their kumara on low-lying land. They'll put it up onto the puke, onto hills. So when they get their water runoff, or they'll make these raised mounds and grow on top of that, so that they would remain dry. So it's about what we do with that mātauranga. One of the things that we wanted to do is, if you can, with this kōrero, is that one of the things that we're really passionate about is people becoming navigators or kaihautu or kaivhakatere of your own life. And I'm just reading, some words popped up on my screen, and I go, oh, what's that? I said, is that time already? But this is here is just a guide. I hope, my goal is that if you have your Maramataka, that you learn the stories associated with that and write some narratives of that, because behind each name is a story. But not only just a story, it's got the activities that need to be done at that time. That there's also an atua connected with that time. And it goes back to ngā pūrako kia maumahara. From our stories, we will remember them. It's about applying those mātauranga and those connections together. We have a look in terms of today and the way that everything's being rolled out. When we don't have a plan in action and we don't have foresight, it often causes us to panic and causes us more stress. And at the moment, there's so much, or especially here in Tāmaki, there is a lot of distress around, especially around this ngārara COVID. And one of the things about when we're using Maramataka, it's able to look forward and to look back, because we have a look at our most scarcest time is through raumati. And one of the things about raumati is quite interesting. A lot of our tipuna would, during these summer months, would eat scarcely. They would call it the waru. And that waru meant that they ate little bits at that time. And one of the studies that we found when working with these university students, when they come in, did a study on this organisation I used to work for, is that children eat less during summer. They run around more, they're really active. And so that was exactly the same with our tipuna. They would eat less at that time, but they needed they ate all the pipis, all the small things, and they just went into a lot of fasting during that raumati time, because all the energy was being conserved for when the harvest was coming, which is ngā huru. Aroha mai. And ngā huru. So these are really flipping our thinking, the two most important seasons of the year to our tipuna, kuanga and ngā huru. The other two were known as scarce times, raumati and hōtoke. So we know that each summer and winter roll around, that those are going to be the hardest times for our whānau. So we're really going to have a look as what can we have in terms of our kaimara. What can we plant now that we can put away in terms of our pātaka kai? Oh, no, 3 minutes. That went pretty quick. So this is a here. I hope if you can take a photo of it. I don't know if there's going to be a recording of this, but this is just here as a guide. Even like, and not that these colours mean anything, but these red area was in reference to the rākau nui, the full moon. And when we talk about tuia ki te rangi, tuia ki te whenua, tuia ki te moana, tuia ki te rangi is also taking care of our mind. Rangi, you know, when we use those words, haurangi, pōrangi, ruarangi, ururangi, is all the states of that mind. So whatever we feed the mind is connected to tuia ki te whenua being our tinana, and tuia ki te moana being our wairua, is those three things that bound together in terms of what we feed our tinana, what we put into our tinana, also nourishes our hinengaro, also nourishes our wairua. So Maramataka is a lunar calendar, but it contains all the rituals and all the practices that we need to do in terms of kai, wai, and the protection of our taiao, when to take, when to give. It's a beautiful. When we dig a little bit deeper, our tipuna we're pretty amazing, and I think they learnt a lot. We often say our tipuna try to live as close as they can to the whenua, try and keep as close as they can to the moana and to the awa. And ultimately, if I can put Maramataka in its simplest form, it's just knowing where you stand and knowing the environment that you're in. And if we're having whānau that are struggling or in distress or they haven't moved, they haven't realigned their Maramataka, they haven't adjusted. Maramataka needs to be adjusted, just like these. It doesn't quite run in 30 days, but there's days we put in, days we pull out. It keeps us on our toes. Maramataka keeps us on our toes. And I promise you, if you were to follow Maramataka 100%, you'll lose your job. You'll get sacked. Because Maramataka says don't go to work that day. Maramataka said have this 8 days off to be with your family. Which doesn't quite align with our work environment. But it goes back to the whakatauki, tui ki te rangi, tui ki te mona, tui ki te rangi, tui ki te whenua, tui ki te mona, I rongo te pōronga te ao. With the knowledge within my hinengaro, my tinana and my wairua, how do I maintain this balance of this world that we live in today? Upholding the mātauranga of our tipuna, but also living within this world that operates in a completely time dimension of our taiao. Nō reira, I think, is that our time? Is it a pātai time?
Yeah, can everyone see me and hear me?
Oh, stop sharing.
My screen is playing up, so I can't see everybody at the moment. Oh man, how do you summarize that? Just listening to that kororo and I guess one of the things I took out of it was that don't compare the Maramataka. Just sit in one and learn from that and be okay with that. I just want to chuck out to everybody to see whether someone's got some pātai, any comments, anything that they want to share before we have to wrap up. We've got 5 minutes, whānau. 5 minutes. Anybody? Play? Can you see me? Can you see me, Rikki?
Yep, I can see you.
Ka pai. If anyone's got any pātai, just feel free to unmute. Put your hand up. I'll just make sure I can see everybody. But I guess we've got 1 minute there. We've got 1 minute. Paiana. Well, okay, with that, Rikki, I just want to mahi to you and all the korero that you've shared, and I think you've refined wrapping up all of that stuff in, 40 minutes? Gee. Good, all right. So we'll just go back into the main room and then have a bit of a wrap-up, eh? Ngā mihi, Rikki.
Ngā mihi nui koutou.